Hi, I'm Larry Puckett. Today we're going to take a look at these little guys here. These are Model U North American train figures. So Model U, I'll remind you, is a British company, but they've gone into producing figures for North American model railroaders. So we're going to take a look at those. I'm also going to give you a couple of tips on painting these, and they're a little bit different than what I've done in the past. So let's go ahead and get started. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Well, today's video is going to be a little bit shorter than normal because several things have happened around here. First of all, my wife fell and broke her wrist in 2 places, so I'm having to do a lot more things around here than I normally have to, so I haven't had a lot of time to work on extra video material for you. Hopefully that will change somewhat in a couple of weeks when she gets the big cast off and a smaller working cast put on. On the good side, though, I did get my DCS 240 back from Digitrax. You know, that was the one that got hit in the lightning strike and it blew the USB port. I sent it down to them. They turned it around and got it back to me within 2 weeks. So that was an amazing turnaround from that standpoint. And I really appreciate that to the folks at Digitrax. Thanks a lot for getting that back to me as fast as you were able to. Also, somebody commented that I should consider using my iPhone as a backup video camera. Well, not long after that comment came in, my wife went out and changed us over from one cell service provider to another. And unfortunately, my iPhone was so old that they couldn't do that. I had to buy a new iPhone. So I now have a new iPhone SE, and the video on it is going to work out just fine. I can even shoot 4K video with that little sucker. So right now I've got to get an iPhone holder for my tripod and an interface for the microphone. But other than that, if I do go down with this big camera, I should at least be able to use my iPhone as a backup camera to shoot in the meantime. And I might actually be able to use that iPhone to get into very restricted spaces, like underneath of my layout here, and be able to shoot videos of things like installing tortoise switch machines underneath of the layout. So in the future, I will be experimenting more with the iPhone and find out just how much I can do with it, and it might come out to be a very useful tool in addition to being a good, reliable phone. Okay, let's go ahead and get on with today's subject. Now, if you're familiar with the channel here, you might remember that a little over a year ago, I did a video on painting figures. And those were 00 scale figures. That was one of the options being produced by Model U in the UK. And these are very interesting figures because they are so lifelike. He actually scans people using some sort of a handheld laser scanner, and he scans that into the computer, creates a 3D model, and then prints these out using a 3D printer. So he's got great detail on these, and they have the most naturalistic poses. It's like the individual is standing there in front of you. They're so realistic that I actually recognized a fellow on one of the trains at one of the Heritage Railways that he had actually scanned, and asked him about it, and he confirmed that's who it was. So that's how realistic these little guys are. Now, I watched him do this when I was in Worley back last November, and it really is an interesting process he uses. And I really wish there was someone here in the US that offered this service. But a couple of years before COVID kicked in, I had actually contacted Alan Butler, the owner of Model U, and asked him if he was planning on doing any US figures. And at the time, he did not have anything, but he asked me about the prospects of coming over one summer and visiting a couple of the railroad museums where he could do some scans to take back and produce figures for the North American model scene. Well, of course, COVID got in the way of that. But what he was able to do a couple of years ago, I think around 2021, somewhere in that time period, he found a costume dealer in the UK who provided costumes for movie sets and for plays, things of that nature. And that fellow had costumes that were appropriate for North American railroaders. So he rented a bunch of them, dressed a bunch of people up, and did a lot of scans. And he has produced a number of North American figures that represent train crews from both the transition era and the modern era. And he's got something like 70 different figures available right now. And you can view those at his website, and I will put his website address in the description to this video, so you'll be able to take a look at that. And just to give you an idea, here's a couple of O-scale ones that he sent me. This is an O-scale engineer, and it's just beautifully detailed. Really kind of neat. And this one right here is an O-scale hobo. And he's got a lot of different figures like this as well on his website. So take a look at these. What I want to show you today, though, is the HO version of these. And I've got a number of those set up here, and I want to show you how I went about doing a different approach to painting them. So I'm going to zoom in here and we'll take a look. So this is a selection of the various transition era crew members. I've also got this little guy here. He is from the modern crew, but he looks appropriate to be a manager or something of that nature, sitting there with his notepad, keeping track of what's going on. Now, just for reference, this guy right here is 00 scale, whereas this one here is HO scale. So this just gives you an idea of how different the figures are. They're probably about the same size in real life, but obviously this guy is 176 and this is 187. So a little bit of difference in the relative sizes. Now let me get him out of the way, and I'll show you the rest of this. So you can see they are set up with a number of different poses, different guys leaning and standing and talking and doing all kinds of things. So you've got a number leaning on railings. You've got some that are leaning. This guy here is leaning over maybe through the cab window of a locomotive. But there's just this whole series of different figures in various poses for you. And you'll be able to see all of those on his website. I've taken a slightly different approach to painting these. If you remember, last year when I showed you how I painted this guy, I just painted him flat out and then after they had dried, I went over them with an India ink wash and used that to create the shadows and the coloration. But I tried a different trick. I did a lot of research on YouTube, and one of the sets of videos that I looked at was Wargamer painting methods. Because those guys, if you've looked at some of these Wargamer figures, you know that they are very, very realistic. And also some of the military modelers use similar techniques, and they come out looking quite realistic. So I wanted to see if there was something that could be transferred as far as methods to these little figures like this. So here is what I did. Now, just to remind you, this is what an unpainted figure looks like. So that guy, that's a 00 scale guy that I still need to paint. And he is done in, and these are printed up in a very nice resin. It's not overly brittle, but there are things that you can break off, like shovel handles. You got to be very careful around things like that. But otherwise, these are very, very resilient little guys. This guy here, I have taken and painted him black all over. And the idea behind this is you get the black on, and then when you apply your paint over that, it's going to be still there and providing the shadows. So you're painting the whole guy or the whole figure with the black paint. Then I came back and hit this little guy, you can see, with white paint from the top down, so that we're looking down as if the sun is directly overhead. And you can also hit them a little bit from the side if it's going to be at a different time of the day. So depending on what effect you want to achieve, you can adjust the angle of the sunlight by simply spraying the paint either directly from overhead at a slight angle. So what I ended up with was the legs and the lower areas, places like that are going to be shadowed, are darker. They're closer to black. Whereas up here on top, if you look straight down at him, he looks like somebody's dusted him with confectionery sugar or something of that, or he's been standing out in a snowstorm getting dusted. And I did that to all of these. You can see all of these, they've got the black. Well, it actually looks gray because I did hit it with a little bit of the white. But at any rate, you've got these raised areas that are going to be white, as they would be in the sunshine, and then the top of the head and the shoulders, that area is all white, very white, because he's getting direct sun there. Here on the back, you can see that there's a gradation. As you go down, you've got a lighter area up here on the shoulders, and then it goes down into the darker areas. But there's also some light colored highlights here and there from various folds in the clothing. So that's the effect you want to achieve. And it's fairly easy. It just takes, you do have to have an airbrush. I haven't tried this using a rattle can. You might be able to do that if you get a very fine mist and stay back quite a distance. But it's something you'd have to experiment with. But at any rate, you can see this guy is very distinctive. He has a very white or light colored back and shoulders and head. But if you look down here, underneath of that, he's almost pure black under here. So that's the distinction that you're trying to achieve. Then, once you've got all these guys painted, and I've got a bunch of them here, you can see how he's two tones. So we're painting all these guys in the two tones, the white on top, and then the black, dark black gray on the bottom. And that gray is just the result of the paint itself mixing. And here's one that I have gone ahead and painted. So if you look at him, you can see I gave him a denim colored jacket. So he's got that nice blue denim jacket and black pants. Now, of course, you're not going to see much down here. There is a little bit of the light color that is still popping through. And if you look here, though, on the back, you can see quite distinctively the lighter shade up here still coming through the blue. So again, it looks like he's got his jacket on, he's standing out in the sun, and he's got the very lighter color up here because of the bright sunlight on his shoulders. And then as you go down, you're getting a gradation to the darker color where he's a little bit more shaded. And if you look here on the front, you can also see it here. It does come out quite nicely. You will get areas of darker blue and lighter blue next to one another where there's a fold in the cloth or a wrinkle. Anything like that does stand out quite nicely. Now, this guy here, who keeps falling off of his little cork, and that's another thing I wanted to explain to you. One of the viewers here on YouTube suggested to me that instead of holding these little guys in a pair of tweezers, he suggested that I use some glue to attach them to the top of wine corks. So I immediately started saving wine corks, cut them up, and made some little platforms. So it makes it very easy to hold these while you're painting them. And to be able to remove these guys at a later date and reposition them, I use Woodland Scenic's Accent Glue. So it's sort of a gooey latex type formula that you put on, you let it dry to go clear. And once you get them to stay in place, it does a pretty good job of holding them while you're doing your painting. And it's a lot easier. You don't have to fiddle with them in a pair of tweezers. You can just, and that one, he keeps falling off. I need to put a little bit more glue on him. But at any rate, otherwise, they do stay put fairly well so that you can do your spray painting and your hand painting. Now this little guy here, I did hand paint him with the blue pants. And you can see there's various gradations of lighter and darker blue in here. I didn't do that. It's just a result of the difference between the dark areas from the black spray first and then the overspray with the white. And I didn't actually use white. I used a very, very, very light gray called Southern Pacific Letter Gray. It's so light that it looks white in bright light. But at any rate, having that two-tone pattern of the black and the overspray of the lighter color, it does a very nice job of giving you these shadow effects and the highlight effects that you see. And if you look at him, you can still see here on his back, even though he's got a very light gray shirt, and that's that Southern Pacific Letter Gray, it does still show through here. You still see that very light area that is on his shoulders. And then further down, you can see areas of gradation where you've got shadows with darker areas as a result of the underlying black paint. And the same thing down here on the legs. You can see down here we've got the lighter color popping through in places and the darker color. And again, that's simply a matter of the way that it was pre-treated like that. So I think this is a pretty effective method. It's easy to do. It's a lot easier to control than when you're trying to apply the India ink black wash over the completed figure. I think I would use this method here with the black and the white overspray and then paint over that and then just hit it with some dull coat. And I did hit these with a flat varnish over top of them to knock down some of the reflections. I think this guy's cap still needs a little touch more of dull coat right here on the top. But otherwise, I'm very happy with the way these little guys turned out. So give this a try the next time you're going to be doing some figure painting. Not finger painting, but figure painting. I think you'll find that it works very well, even in the small scales like HO scale. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. So whether or not you need an engineer to go in your locomotive or a hobo to sit somewhere in a boxcar maybe, take a look at the Model U website. They have a great selection. There's 70 different figures for the North American prototype. So take a look at those, and I think you'll find that they're quite interesting. These are available, of course, from Model U in the UK. You can order them, and they get here fairly quickly. Or you can order these from various of their distributors in the UK if you're located there. So, have a great weekend, have a great week, and I'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guide. Bye now.